Good morning. Welcome to our webinar on GDPR. I'm Allison Flero, and with me today is Julia Correa. We're both project managers here at Dialog Insight. Now we have a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're recording today, and following the presentation you will get a link to the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint. If you have any questions or comments, please share them in the webinar chat screen and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's get started with the principles of GDPR. So the European General Data Protection Regulation came into effect on May 25th, 2018, meaning that digital interactions with European residents will have new implications for your business. The regulations in Europe haven't been updated since 1995, and a lot has changed online since then, so they made these changes to bring everything up to date and ensure the security of users' personal data. The new regulation aims at increasing the obligations of organizations processing personal data and at strengthening the control that European citizens have over the collection and use of their personal information. The GDPR applies to any organization that processes the personal data of European residents and citizens. We at Dialog Insight have already added additional tracking and data protection features on top of the existing tools and consent center in our application to help you take all the necessary measures to comply with the new regulations. So please note, however, Dialog Insight can't give legal advice, so it's your responsibility to check with your lawyers and make sure that you conform to the regulations. Okay, so let's review what GDPR implies. First of all, it's important to appoint a data protections officer for your company. The data protection officer's main duties are to ensure compliance with the GDPR for all of the applications, to advise the controller on its applications, and to act as a contact person with supervisory authorities. It's important that this person checks all the data acquisition sources, whether it's Google Analytics, Salesforce, an e-commerce tool, or others, to understand how the information is stored, treated, shared, and used by the company. Everything should be mapped out so you can have a global view of all the interactions with the data, the points where it's collected, where it's stored, how it's being used, and even the destruction of the data. Big data is a big deal right now, so we estimate that we accumulate 2 megabytes of data per day on an individual. Now it's also estimated that only about 0.5% of that data that's captured is actually used. So a best practice is to only gather the information needed and that you know you will use. For example, if we're sending a newsletter and we only need the email address and first name to personalize, then it's not necessary to capture the postal code if in the end we're not going to use it anyway. It's important to have a strategy in place so you only collect what you need and plan on using. Next we have the principles of privacy and design and privacy by default, which is to always offer the highest level of security and privacy by default. It's something Dialog Insight already does by limiting access to the data in client accounts to only certain people. So it's not everyone that can access all of our contacts, all of our accounts. It's really only the people who need access to information like support, who needs access to help users, or the project managers to help clients with their projects, but they only have access to their own client accounts. So we have users with different permission levels to make sure it's not open to everyone. It's also important to check with the other companies that you work with to make sure they have the same standards, and of course that on your end it's as secure as possible. Next is ensuring transparency. So users must be informed in a clear and understandable way about how you'll be using the data. They must also be able to indicate consent or refusal of the processing of their personal data. The important information to explain to the user is what data is collected, the purpose of the processing. So if you're collecting information on a form to be able to send a newsletter, then explain that to them. It should also explain the data retention period and the consequences of the refusal to provide personal data. So the idea is to completely be transparent. So if you're collecting data, it's important to list all the communications that the user will receive because of that opt-in. Now, in the same optic as transparency, the right to portability and the right to be forgotten give users the possibility to dispose of their data as they wish, either by requesting its retrieval in order to transmit it to a third-party enterprise, or by asking for its destruction. Dialog Insight now offers this option, and Julia is going to show that to us a little bit later. Dialog Insight already conformed and trained their employees on GDPR, but it's important for you and your company to train your employees who are likely to handle data. They must be aware of best practices to ensure its protection and confidentiality, and make sure to train all concerned within the enterprise. All right, so how do you know if you're targeted by the regulation? Actually, a lot of companies will be affected by GDPR, even if you are in Canada or anywhere other than Europe. Everyone that interacts with European data is obligated to conform with the GDPR. The European Union is able to take action internationally. Now we can see they've already taken action against the biggest companies like Apple and Google. The instant a European citizen enters your website, you're obligated to offer them the choice to have their data collected or not, or at the very least to inform them that you are collecting the data. So how can you tell if you have contacts in Europe? Well, in the platform, you can use the country field to create groups that target everyone in Europe. If you don't have country listed for everyone, you could try with the email address and target by the extension, like .fr, for example, which is an extension that they use in Europe. Lastly, you could use geolocation to make groups targeting contacts in Europe. Now I suggest you check our online help or call support if you need help making these groups. So now Julie is going to walk us through the tools that are available in the Dialog Insight platform.
All right, well, thanks Allison, and good morning everyone. So as you all know, and Allison has mentioned, Dialog Insight has already some features in place. One of them that you probably already use is our Consent Center, which allows you to manage the explicit consent by type of communication. It works for CASL, the Canadian anti-spam legislation, as well as the GDPR. However, as we understand the GDPR requirements, there is no concept of an implied consent for the GDPR. Therefore, the contact must have given you explicit consent, and it needs to be clear on what you're sending to them. Right, so now let me show you the new features we have put in place to assure you are GDPR compliant. So we have 4 main modules that we modified because of the GDPR, or they are journey, landing pages, delete, export contact, so the contact profile, and the tracking consent, so what we're calling communications tracking consent. The first one we're going to talk about is a journey. For those of you that don't know, this is our light version of Google Analytics. So it would follow the contact visit to your website if that option is configured. It would then provide you with all the stats from a contact that visit the website after clicking on a message sent using the Dialog Insight platform. So in many ways, very similar to Google Analytics. You would then be able to use this information to segment your next email campaign. As it was, if Journey is configured, we would track the visit starting at the very first page visit. So in order to be in accordance with GDPR, if the behavior consent option is on, a pop-up will now be displayed on the very first page requesting authorization to follow that contact's visit. Thus, we won't be gathering any stats on that very first page until consent is given. Oh, actually, even if consent is given, the first page is never tracked. So once the contact accepts, gives this consent, accepts to be tracked, we'll then be able to install the cookies and start tracking the visit from that point on. So as I said, first page is never tracked. So let me show you how this actually looks like. So this is how on our website, if you're visiting it for the first time, you can see here at the very bottom our pop-up with the consent if you want to be, if you accept to be tracked. So the format can vary, and another good example is this French website, CNL. Unfortunately, most of the really good information regarding GDPR on this site is actually in French, but what I really want to show you here is their consent banner. So they have it at the top here, and you notice that they have okay, accept all, or personalize. And why personalize? Because you interact with several different portions of their website, meaning Facebook, Twitter, and whatever else. So they have a cookie management system which allows you to determine which portion you are allowing to be tracked, if you're allowing for everything or just portions of the website. We don't have, Dialog Insight doesn't really have that option. However, of tracking by different, managing all your cookies, but we do on our online page for Journey, you can have a couple of examples of cookie management systems that you can use. Some of them are paid, and some of them are free of charge. So it's up to you if you want to install that and which one do you want to install. In terms of how Journey works, let me show you on the platform. So on the platform, you would go into, go into Journey, and then configuration. I'm just going to use one here that we created. To edit the option, you just click on the little crayon here, and here you see wait for visitors' consent to start tracking. So once you click on that, you have your banner, and you can then edit it, the banner, and create your consent. So that's it for Journey. For landing pages, this is the next feature that we had to adapt for the GDPR, and mainly because the landing pages, they are hosted at Dialog Insight and not on your website. So even if you have Journey set up, you won't be able to you won't affect the landing page, so you need to have that extra step. So we have integrated a banner, a tracking banner that will be displayed automatically according to your setup, and then manage if the visit will be tracked or not. You can then have a link to your company privacy policies to provide the contact with more details or information. So again, let's go back to the platform, and just close this. Close Journey, and we go to close this, and go to landing pages. So in Dialog Insight, we'll go to, you'll see under landing pages and configuration, you can see here the new module, the new option that was created. So behavior tracking consent cookies. And here, once you click, you can then say, okay, I want this to be displayed on all my landing pages. And you can then configure that. You have the option English or French, and then you can configure then in terms of what text you want to use, what are the colors, the format of the buttons, etc. The one thing that it's important to remember is that if the person says refuse to be tracked, we won't be able to provide you with any stats regarding that person. So when you go to your landing page and you look at your stats, you won't see here any information regarding that specific contact. So you say here you have 9 unique visitors, but those are the people that accepted to be tracked. So in reality, you could have had 11 or 12 or 10, or actually only 9. So we won't have that information, and that information is not available to you. So that's that for that. And the next one is the profile contact. So some of it we already had in place, and that was the option to delete the contact from your database. So, and once you click on the option, all the information for that contact is deleted. This isn't, though, an option that you can give to the contact themselves. It needs to be done either by you or us. And once you click on delete, everything is gone. So all the information from that client, from that contact, will disappear. So let me just show you where you can find it. I'm just going to look at my friend Sébastien Pelletier. So here you have all the information for the client. So the moment you click on delete, you give you a warning, because once this is deleted, you can't go back. You can't find that information again unless you recover a full backup of your database. So you just have to be careful about this. Another important thing is this is done by project. So if you have more than one project on your account, and Sebastian has asked me to delete him, I have to make sure that I delete him in both projects, one at a time. You can't really delete from all your accounts at the same time. Then the other option that we put in place, and that one was specifically for the GDPR because it didn't exist before, was the export. So that takes, that is related to the portability regulation, and that exports everything, all the information that we have on this specific contact. So once you click here, this will generate, and you click export, this will generate a file. You can then transfer this file. Either you can password protect it or encrypt the file and send through, I don't know, an SFTP. How you're going to send the file, then it's up to you to determine. But all the information from that contact will be then exported to a file. So these two buttons here, they cover the data destruction or the right to be forgotten and the portability GDPR requirements. Our next topic is the communications tracking consent. And this one is, and we will show you, is the feature which allows you to track the contact behavior once a message is received. So in other words, if the contact has opened or clicked on a message sent using the Dialog platform, he or she can now refuse to be tracked by clicking on a specific unsubscribe form. So let's see how that goes. This option also needs to be, it's the only one that really needs to be configured on your account. So you go to, let me close this, we go to configuration and then contacts. And you see this new option here, behavior tracking and that data protection. So here you need to activate that module in order for it to be configured on the system. And the way it will work is that it will now allow you to have a different link on your messages that will allow people to unsubscribe or to refuse to be tracked. The form, once this is activated, the form is it's in the same place as your opt-in and opt-out forms. It's under other forms, and you see it over here, behavior tracking opt-out. So if you click there, again, you have the option of English and French, so very similar to our other forms. And here you can personalize it whatever way you want it. Color, color here on styles, and text and banners if you want to put your logo, if you want to put some other information like your privacy policy link, that will be a good place to do that. Also, the other thing is you can use this behavior track opt-out concept and add it to your subscription or you update forms or your reference center forms. All you have to do is just select that. So as I think we probably have some time, I'm just going to show you really quickly. Just going to open any of those. So when you open the form, and if you go to the form, oh, I was already there, on the form configuration, if you add a field, and you will see when you go to the field selection, at the very bottom, you have tracking consent. So this is the one that tells you if they want to be tracked or not once they receive a message from you. So now let's see how that will look in terms of the profile, the client profile. So let's look at Sébastien again. So on the profile account and on the main tab, the profile tab, you will see the consent at the very bottom here. So Sébastien has refused to be tracked. And if I want to see the historical information about that, I just go to the Consents tab. And here, once again, I have the information about the implied consent, the explicit consent, and then the behavior tracking consent. So here I have the date when he refused, the action that he took, either he refused or he accepted, and what was the source of the action. Let's see, did I say everything? One important thing regarding this consent is that when you look at your results, and again, I'm just going to pick one here just for the sake of it. So when you look at your results currently, you're used to click on in any one of the pies, and if you click on the contacts, you were able to see who were the contacts. Oh, not this one. Okay, bad choice. Okay, so let's see, clicked. Oh, nobody clicked, that's why. Oh, okay, there you go. So when you click on who clicked, you would usually have the list of all the different contacts that clicked on that message. If the person had refused to be tracked, you would then have 3 messages clicked, for example, but you only have 2 people listed here. So you know that one person that clicked is refused to be tracked. So again, so why are you going to have your overall results? So that's not going to affect any of the results here. It will affect how you're going to be able to see that information. So I think that's mainly it in terms of, oh, just one more thing that I realized I forgot. If the person has denied, has refused consent, I'm sorry for the back and forth, but if the person has refused consent, another thing that you won't be able to see is here on the message tab for that contact. This here will be empty, so you won't have the information on any opens or any clicks or any messages sent to that person. And now I think I covered everything that I wanted to. So these are the main features that we have put in place to be compliant with the GDPR. The first three options are already in every account. The last option, the behavior tracking and data protection consent, that needs to be activated by you. And if you don't have access to do that, just let us know or talk to your account admin. They can do that. And just a reminder, the GDPR started to be enforced on May 25th. However, it is still estimated that only 30% of the companies are already compliant to all the new regulations. And if you are afraid that you will lose information on your contacts, because now you have to ask for permission to track them, we don't think this will happen if you're providing important and relevant information. And the key here is relevant information. We've been used to getting those little banners saying that, we are being tracked, that cookies are being tracked. So if things are of our interest, we will accept to be tracked. So we don't really think that it's a need to panic. We just need to make sure that you're following best practices, and you will just have really a good and engaged audience.
Great. Thanks, Julia. I think that's pretty clear. So let's see if we have any questions. The first one here, how do you manage implied consent for Castle? If you want to go ahead and take that one, Julia.
Right. So you need to let us know what are the rules. Implied consent requires you to have a business relationship with the client, with your contact. So someone that has inquired about your products or someone that has actually purchased your products or services, you have a 2-year window to communicate with that person. And our system can actually do the calculation based on that start date and manage from there. You can talk to your account manager or your project manager if you need more information or more details on how to set it up on your account.
Yeah, and that's for Castle.
Yeah.
I think you already said this, that GDPR, there's no such thing, or they don't take into account implied consent. It's really an explicit consent for GDPR.
Yes, correct. As we understand the
question?
GDPR.
Yes. Is offering the option to refuse to be tracked part of the law? So it wasn't spelled out that way, but Dialog Insight has decided to add this option to be on the safer side, just in case it does become a requirement in the future. Another question, how do I delete a contact that I'm not tracking? Julia, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So as long as you have the person's email, you can delete, you can just use the delete button that I show you on the contact. So I think I have Sebastian here. So as long as you have the person's email or whatever is your ID for your account, some accounts don't have emails, the primary ID, but you can then just press delete. And there you go. It doesn't matter if the person is tracked or not. The important thing is to have the email of the contact.
Great. And another question related to deleting contacts. How can I delete several contacts at the same time so that we don't communicate with them any longer?
Right. So let me get that again, because this one is also easy to do. So you can go to groups. And the only thing is when you create a group, you're making a selection. So you need to find something that is the same for all of those contacts, or you can even do by email, one by one, depending on how many there are. But if there is another aspect or another criteria that is exactly the same for all the contacts, you can just include that criteria. So let's say in this case here was province, but anyways. And then once you have your selection done, you can just click on this little guy here, and you can see when you hover over it, it says erase, whoops, disappeared. erase contacts targeted by this group. This will delete everybody that is selected for that group. The system will take care of deleting everything, all the information. If there is any relational data related to those, everything will be deleted. It may take some time for the delete to actually happen, so you may want to wait a little bit before and then check to make sure that, you know, the system has gone through all the cases and have deleted them all. So that's how you can delete many people at the same time because of GDPR or any other need you have.
Great. Next question. Does capturing stats on the first page visited go against the GDPR? So according to our understanding, yes, because the contact hasn't given you the permission yet. So let's say the contact refuses to be tracked, you'd then have to go back and remove or delete the information you've already captured on that first page. Just a couple more questions here. What are the penalties if our vendors are not compliant? So again, as we understand the GDPR, while your vendors may be charged, the relation of the client is with you. So you're ultimately responsible and need to make sure that your vendors are compliant. You can always validate that with your legal department. Can we track the geolocation of the refusal to be tracked in Dialog Insight? So no, we only have the accept, reject status, the source of the refusal, and the date associated with it, but not the geolocation of where they refused. Is there a specified amount of time in which to respect the request to be forgotten? As far as I understand, it's written that the data should be deleted without undue delay. So basically as soon as possible. But this is also a good case to check with your legal team. And I believe that's all the questions. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us today. So if we did miss something or if you have any other questions, please reach out to our account or project manager. Of course, you can always send us a message at info@dialoginsight.com as well. Just one last reminder, Dialog Insight, we're not lawyers. So if your questions are of a legal nature, we'll probably refer you to your legal department or your lawyers. Until next time, have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.